Gnosia, Gnosia, how do you pronounce this? Hey everyone, welcome to Princess of Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with my first impressions reaction to Gnosia. Again, as I said in the cold open, I don't know how to actually pronounce this. I'm gonna say Gnosia from here on out, just for the sake of ease and, having some sense of consistency, but I don't know if that's technically correct. For all I know, the G could be silent. But this is another first impressions for the fall 2025 anime season. We've been doing a few of these. Like I said before, I'm trying to make this a habit every anime season, trying to do some first impressions for a bunch of the new shows airing. The ones that either most interest me or are the most well received that I hear about, stuff like that. In the case of this came out, I think, a couple days ago or something. And I haven't heard anyone talking about it, but I did hear a lot of hype surrounding it ahead of its release. I did hear a lot of people talking about specifically looking forward to this. But I have not heard anything of what it's about. And I didn't look anything up because, it leads to a good reaction when I'm blind as fuck. So, for those of you who are new and don't know what a first impression reaction on this channel is, it's as simple as this sounds. Basically, I react to the first episode or so of a series and determine if it's something I want to continue reacting to in the future, something I would rather watch on my own time, or something I'm just not interested in. It's a way for me to get a first impression of a series that I'm just not entirely confident on whether or not I would want to react to. And so it gives me just a good view of it ahead of time based off the first, again, episode or so. Because a lot of times, I don't care what anyone says, a lot of times you can tell if an anime is for you by the first episode, or at least you can tell if it's kind of in your ballpark. Because you'll get the gist of what an anime is about. Even if, it grows and changes as it moves along, you'll still know at least how it starts off and if that interests you in any way. So, yeah, that's what we're doing here today. We're going to check out this first episode, determine, like I said, if it's something I want to react to, something I want to watch on my own time, or something I'm not interested in. But I have no context for anything. I don't know what the title is in reference to. I don't know what the plot of this is about in any way, shape, or form. I don't know what genre it is. I know nothing about this. All I know is that it had some hype coming into it from a certain sect of fans. It wasn't, huge. It's not like the amount of hype that something like Dan to Dan or My Hero got when they were first coming out. Those shows got a lot more hype for their debut, but I've still seen a good amount, and I've still wondered, okay, I guess people have read the manga or whatever for this, so people are excited, and that makes me interested to see what it's about. If I don't like it, I don't have to continue watching it. It's as simple as that. So, checking out the first episode, not a big deal. But yeah, so let's get this going and hope for the best. Hold up just a sec. Before you click that link down in the description below to get to today's video, I want to remind you of all the awesome content we have both on this channel and the Princess of Gaming channel. Let's check it out. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So I looked it up, and apparently this is based off of a social deduction visual novel game, sort of like Danganronpa, that was originally released for the PS Vita and has been ported to multiple other consoles and systems since. Um, just like Danganronpa, it just happened to get an anime adaptation as well. So this isn't based off a manga. So there is that. But I'm sure that it's going to go mostly the same as the visual novel does. Probably just with like a little less detail. Um, so yeah, this definitely seems to be a lot like Among Us. And as I stated in the reaction, Among Us is in turn inspired by John Carpenter's The Thing. And there's a lot of other connections you can make with this as well. The idea of having a group of survivors having to deal with an imposter being like around them is a concept that has been done in various things by this point. It's not altogether new. And so the concept alone isn't what makes this interesting. What makes this interesting is how it's executed, because it's running on a time loop. And like I can understand how this can be done in a game. Like in terms of a game that makes sense. But in terms of a series where you're just running by the rules of this universe, I'm wondering how that works. Because it's not exactly time travel, it's a time loop, it's a different thing. And if that opening is correct and we're going to have like changes in characters and stuff, and changes in who the Gnosia is, that means we're going between not just time loops, but entirely different timelines where entirely different changes happen. For all we know, this might not even be Yuri's original time period. Or not time period, but timeline. This might not be the original timeline in the first place, the one we saw here. We don't know. All we know is that Yuri is being sent through this time loop now and has to deduce this. I assume the goal is to find the Gnosia and, put the Gnosia into cryo sleep. The deep freeze or whatever the fuck it was called. I'll just call it cryo sleep freeze. And once that actually succeeds, I assume that means it's done, right? But if this is just like repeating that over and over with just different characters, it's like there's got to be more to it than that, right? And for all we know, what if there's a loop where multiple people are infected? Is that not possible? So I feel like there's a lot that this can do, and I'm very curious to see how it handles it. Now, another interesting thing about this is that this takes place in the distant future. A lot of sci-fi related things do. Um, and it seems like humanity has like colonized space, which is, again, a very common thing in a lot of sci-fi. And it's to the point where it seems like, from what I'm gathering here, and just by the way, any of my theories, any of my thoughts, do not correct me on, because I'm sure that'll be explained going forward in the actual show. So it seems like humanity has kind of surpassed gender in a way. Like gender's not really like a big deal. Because it seems like all the characters in this, at least in this first episode, had gender neutral pronouns used for them, they, them pronouns. At least that I noticed. But at the same time, I believe it was SQ, right? Who called Setsu a woman. And Setsu responded. I wonder if that was a clue that it was SQ. Because Setsu responded, I'm not a woman. And again, they them pronouns were used. So I'm wondering if that was maybe a little clue that it was SQ. And the thing is, I thought SQ was maybe a little too suspicious because of the way that they were acting. They were acting like obviously very wild and odd. And I felt like that made them a little too obvious. But I guess in this case it was that obvious. They were definitely the most suspicious. But I assume in that each loop is not going to be quite the same as that. That some of them are going some of the time the Gnosia is going to be like suspicious and some of the time not. I assume it's going to like just be unpredictable in that way. I'm wondering because we saw in the opening that Yuri was being put into one of the cold pods. So I'm wondering if Yuri could end up being the Gnosia. Is that possible? Can Setsu be the Gnosia? I assume Setsu can. But Setsu also seems to know a lot more. Setsu also seems to have like knowledge that the others don't. And the cube at the end, the one that Setsu gave Yuri, is presumably what allows Yuri to go through this time loop, which means that that probably was the first like timeline, and that would also imply then that Setsu knows about the time loop and purposefully put Yuri on that path, but why? And for what reason? And there's so many questions. That's kind of a big thing about social deduction things like this. Danganronpa did the same thing. You wondered a lot about like what a person's motives could be and so on and so forth. So I'm very curious to see where this goes. I'm very curious to see like how much more there is to this and what other and what, who these other characters are. One of them looked like a very stereotypical gray alien. There was another who was like a dolphin in a spacesuit that was adorable, which probably means that's going to be the Gnosia. You know, we can't have an adorable dolphin sidekick without them being the Gnosia. But yeah, it's like this is fascinating because I noted while we were watching this that this was going by very fast, and now we know why. This first episode was a single loop. Is every episode going to be a loop? Or are we going to have multiple episodes within the same loop? I don't know. It feels like the computer is making them like choose very quickly though. So I don't know how they could do that. And we don't have a huge amount of information. Like what we know is that they're from the planet Luan. That they had to leave the planet. They're en route to another planet. That when a human is infected with Gnos, they become a Gnosia, which is a carrier, and they become almost like an intelligent zombie, to where they can, disguise themselves, hide themselves as a normal person. But their goal is to eradicate all humanity within their vicinity. And in this case, the goal of the Gnosia would also be to get to this other planet and start probably spreading this Gnos throughout it. So we also know that like once it gets down to only two people, the Gnosia has no reason to not reveal themselves because there's only one other person, and it's like at that point they can just take that person out. So we got info. We got quite a bit of info. But at the same time, there's still a lot we don't know. Uh Now let me talk about my thoughts on each of the characters. So Yuri is kind of a blank slate, and that makes sense. Yuri is the player character, clearly. Um, and the amnesia aspect of that is part of this. Um, in Danganronpa, you play as an actual character with like actual character to them, but in this it's clear that the character is meant to be a blank slate, so you can probably like play them as in any way that you kind of want, and maybe like as you go along you figure out like clues about your past and you get to maybe even like shape that in ways. So I don't really have any thoughts on Yuri right now because I just don't feel there's enough information on them. Setsu seems very nice and likable on the surface, but is, as Yuri has made note of, hiding a lot. And that could be good, that could be bad, we don't know. We absolutely do not have enough information there. Rakio was definitely the more of the asshole type character who's meant to be very standoffish and accusatory. Um, it was clear in the end that they weren't the Gnosia, but I just off of instinct wasn't the biggest fan of them because of the accusatory nature. I'm not like a big fan of that kind of personality personally. Then we have Gina, with a J, who was kind of like shy and quiet and didn't really say or do much. And we know that during the warp, Gina was the one who was taken out. Gina was just killed. We don't know how, we don't know like how violently it was, but Gina was dead. And Gina seemed very passive, so that kind of tracks, that kind of makes sense. But that also could be perfect hiding for a Gnosia during one of these loops. If again, as the intro implies, it's gonna change who the Gnosia is, which I assume it has to, because it can't just be SQ the entire time. Speaking of SQ, like I said, SQ was the most suspicious. They were very like high energy, and the things they were saying just felt off. But like I said, I thought it was like too obvious. Ended up just being the obvious one. SQ, like if it weren't for the social deduction aspect, if it weren't for um the fact that they're trying to find, a murderous zombie person, I wouldn't mind SQ's personality. The context of the series actually changes how I feel about them. Because in a normal anime, I would like SQ. I kind of dig those kind of quirky, over the top personalities. But because of the context of this, that makes them like super suspicious and weird. And it just it bugs me out a little bit. So it's like I'm very curious to see how things go. Now, I assume the personalities are very similar to how they were like before infection, because we know that the memories can stay the same and all. And we know that like who they are, like the infected have all that knowledge of who they are and like what they're like and everything. So I assume, like, if for example, if we see SQ return, even if they're not the Gnosia in the next or another loop, they'll still be acting the same. Very flirty, very over the top, very silly. But I assume if they return, they'll probably not be the Gnosia again, because it's too obvious. Especially with them already having been the Gnosia. You have to kind of switch it up. I'm very curious about the other characters we've seen, but like I said, I have nothing to really go on with them. I do like the fact that they compared this to Werewolf, because I've played that in real life. It's a social deduction game. The versions I've seen usually have like a deck of cards that have like the rules on them, and it's like, okay, like you put your heads down, close your eyes, and then it's like, okay, werewolves wake up, look at each other, put your heads back down, and so on and so forth. It's like, I've played it. I've played Ultimate Werewolf. I've played a couple versions of this. I'm honestly, I'm surprised I haven't heard if there is one, but I assume there almost would be. Um, I feel like there should be at least a version of Werewolf that's specifically, themed around John Carpenter's The Thing. I feel like that would just make so much sense, but I haven't heard of one existing. Um, Overall, I like the animation. It's a little different, a little unique compared to other things I've seen. I assume it's emulating the art style and animation of the visual novel. Oh, and I wanted to see what studio this is. Let me look that up real quick. Google Gnosia. Also, I'm glad that they said it enough times that I do have the pronunciation down. Gnosia. Oh, by the way, just like I said, the visual novel originally released in 2019, so it's actually fairly recent, all things considered. For the PS Vita, it was ported to the Switch. It's also on Windows, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X/S. So it's on pretty much everything. I guess just not Switch 2 right now for obvious reasons. Let me see here. Okay, so the studio is Demerica. I want to see what else they've done. Because I don't recognize the name offhand. The World Ends With You, the animation. I think I've heard of that. But otherwise, they have done, like, very little. They only did their first series in 2021. So they're a new company. And they've only done one film so far, which is Token Rambu Kai, Doden Chikashi Haberao Monara, which I guess is a prequel to a series that they've also done, according to what this says. Oh, hold on. Okay, so they actually started in 2017, but they did a couple of ONAs, original net animations. Um, and they did another one of those in 2022. But they didn't start doing like actual like shows, like full television series until 2021. So they're still fairly new. It says they were founded in 2012. I guess they just didn't like really get the ball rolling right away, which makes sense. They wanted to get everything set, everything figured out. Yeah, their first work was in December of 2017. Their first actual series was in April of 2021. So yeah, this is a company, this is a studio that's fairly new still though, and has not done a lot of works. So that's really interesting in and of itself. I have no issue so far. I have absolutely no issue with this first episode and with their style and everything. I think that it looks good. It sounds good, like good voice acting, good audio work. Um, I'm I'm interested. I am definitely like interested in this series. And I definitely will continue reacting to it. I just don't know when we're going to get back to it. Whenever I feel like we get back to it, maybe I'll put it on a poll at some point. I don't know. We'll play it by ear. It's not like a massive priority for me, but we will get back to it. Um, so for the time being, though, Tell me in the comments below, what did you think of this first episode of Gnosia? Let me know your thoughts, and as always, no spoilers. I'm going into this entirely blind, and with this kind of series especially, I want that to remain the case. I do not want to know anything going forward. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See you all next time.